the AI or quantum computing mechanism kicks in and says, sir, you have a 9 o'clock appointment at the hospital. You can't go to the office yet. So the car's going to take you to the hospital so that you can do your blood test. As an example, as I'm going, you've got satellite enablement that's tracking and letting the doctors in the hospital know, oh, Mr. David is inbound. He's going to be here in 17 minutes. Make sure everything he needs has been prepped. And you start to get a sense of this infusion and integration of technology and humankind.
I'm Chris Campbell with David Mohale, co-hosting this episode of the Citizens Podcast. We have the most incredible guest today, Tomi Davies, joined us on call from London, and what an amazing range of topics and the future. What could it look like? David, what blew your mind?
Chris, cyberspace, human enhancement, and the fact that my own robot might not allow me to enjoy a pancake in the future. Think about that.
Let's get started. Welcome, Tomi, to the second ever episode of a Citizens Podcast. We are very pleased to be having this conversation. I'm here with King David, and the two of us are in Cape Town. And Tomi, where are you at the moment?
I'm actually in London, in England, in the United Kingdom.
And are you always in London?
My wife says I should stop telling people I live in London because she believes I live on a plane. And if it wasn't for COVID, she wouldn't have seen as much of me as she's seen in the last few months.
Wow.
It must have been a strange experience for you, COVID, lockdown, being tied down to one place for so long.
Well, in 2019, I was in 19 countries. Last year, before COVID hit, I was in my 5th country when the shutdown began. Since April of last year till now, I've only been in 3 countries. So that sort of sets it in perspective.
I can't help immediately asking is how did that feel for you after so many years of so much travel to have a longer period of time with much less travel?
Well, it's been a bit disturbing. Not because of the lack of travel, but it's the fact that on some days I wake up having a meeting in South Africa in the morning. By, let's say, lunchtime, I'm having a meeting with Namibia. For afternoon tea, it's probably a meeting with Ethiopia. And then by dinner time, it's probably somebody in Cairo. And that seems to be a consistent thread as evidenced by this session we're having today. I mean, earlier today, I was talking to people in Addis. I've talked to people in Lagos, and I continue to have the meetings. If anything, it has increased the number of interactions I have because it has taken out the flying. Like I said, COVID has caused the death of distance.
COVID has caused the death of distance.
Correct. Historically, if you and I were going to do this, you would have said, oh, when's the next time you're in South Africa? Because I'd like for us to do a podcast. That would have been the phraseology. Not let's jump on Zoom or jump on Google Meet or Microsoft Teams or whatever it is and do one.
Wow. Interesting. You sound very comfortable, I might say, with the fact that, distance is dead, if I may put it in that way. Is it perhaps maybe you also have a love for tech? Because I've heard in a couple of podcasts talking passionately about technology and where it all began for you. Do you mind maybe diving a bit into that?
Yeah, and why I'm called the grandfather of tech in Lagos is because I started my career out in the early 80s at IBM, writing microcode for the PC Junior. as a programmer in Boca Raton, Florida. Since then, I've been in corporate innovation. So, for example, I built a data center for Alpha Aquitaine in Lagos, Nigeria. I built the first website for Marks and Spencer in the UK. I built direct.gov for the UK government. I built Opodo.com when I was a sapient. And then turn of the century, I crossed over back to the continent where I helped put in biometrics for payroll with the Nigerian government and the World Bank. I helped put the African Agriculture Technology Foundation on the map in Nairobi, Kenya. And over sort of the last 5 years now, I've been working as an angel investor, which I started sort of about the turn of the century, having had a very, very good run with one of my startups called Striker Entertainment, which is now a Disney property, and building a portfolio. I think there's something like about 18 or 20 startups in that portfolio now. We started the Africa Business Angel Network in 2015 alongside Chris and others, where we discovered there were only 5 angel networks on the continent. And in those 5 years, we sort of worked tirelessly, and we're now at 51 angel networks that, are recognized by ABAN in 33 different African countries. And I'm actually, as we speak, working on the 52nd one with people in Lusaka, Zambia, to help put together the Zambian Angel Investment Network.
Tomi, that's quite a journey. I think you covered 4 decades there in 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's sort of a whistle stop tour of my career.
It's really incredible. I think you had an effect in my school days, because I used to receive those Super Striker magazines, comic books for free. I think they gave them to us for free.
Exactly. They were inserts in the Sunday paper.
Wow. That's incredible.
Mm.
Tomi, please tell us a little bit more just about that journey in was it all perfectly mapped out ahead of time? Did you know exactly what you were getting yourself into? What happened?
I didn't know anything about angel investing at that time. I had a friend called Oliver Power, and we'd been friends. Remember, I told you about the Marks and Spencer website. So we'd been friends since the UK. When I went to Nigeria at the turn of the century, he returned to South Africa because Mandela had gone, was in South Africa, and Obasanjo was in Nigeria. So we both returned to our home countries, highly optimistic. And he decided to do a comic. It started out as a superheroes. We were going to do the African superheroes. So we're going to do Chaka the Zulu. We were going to do Mansa Musa, etc. And then took a look, and it was like, if we're really going to do this commercially, we'd better move over to the most popular sport on the continent, which is soccer, especially because Roy of the Rovers was something I'd grown up on. So essentially, Super Strikers became an African Roy of the Rovers with African names, and the whole idea being rags to riches, but doing the right thing. That became the thematic of the comic, and that's what made it extremely popular. It started in Cape Town, actually. Oliver's family are actually the family that run the cable car to Tabletop Mountain. So he then, one day I just got a call saying, I'm doing this, and we need help because we're thinking of a Pan-African play. And that's how I became an angel investor.
So through a friend?
Yep, correct. And then the comic did quite well. I think we got to like about 9 countries. We did different types. In India, we actually did it for cricket. That failed woefully. And then, of course, YouTube came along, and Ollie decided, we've got to test the animation. And while we were testing the animation, Media 24 came along and bought a large chunk of the company. And that's when I knew what exits were all about and angel investing was all about. Because when they first sent me the money, I thought somebody's made a mistake. I don't want to go to jail. You know, when you're expecting $25 and somebody puts $250 in your bank account, you know, you have to wonder. And that's what happened to me. And that's sort of how my angel journey actually began. Subsequent.
And Tomi, just to be clear, Media 24, they gave you more than $250, right?
Correct. They gave me, let's just say I was at 50x.
Sure.
Within a 7-year period.
That's incredible. And I mean, would you say that's the normal angel expectation? Your first deal, you're probably going to get 50x.
That's the angel dream. I've not seen that since. I keep hoping, I keep betting. And like I just told you, I've got about 15 to 18 of them I'm betting on right now. That maybe we'll see another striker, but I haven't seen one yet. Hope springs eternal.
On angel investing, Mr. Davies, it sounds like it's something that you didn't set out to do initially. It almost came to you, and you had to sort of understand what it is, what angel investing is. Do you feel you still need to explain to people the difference between angel investing and other types of investing?
All the time, because all people ever hear is investor. Then I get pitches that are for VCs saying, oh, I'm just raising $500,000. Oh, I'm just raising 1.5 million. I got one today. Somebody's raising 2 million. The largest check I've ever written to anybody as a single check was $35,000.
Yeah, that immediately puts some perspective to how people should be thinking about where's your involvement and how early stage it needs to be.
Exactly. And the thing is, though, because about 5 years ago, we moved from helping founders that were still building their minimum viable product to post revenue only, simply because the ecosystem had grown and matured, and we were starting to see very, very favorable post revenue deals. The ticket size has changed. That's the first thing. And secondly, we're seeing more syndication now. So I write my check for 20K. I've got a syndicate of, just like you guys, alumni. Okay, guys, I went to secondary school with, and each person writes 20, and all of a sudden we're at, 200K. So that's sort of how we work it now. And then we've also got an angel syndicate here in London that is comprised primarily of diasporans, and what they do is matching funds. So when people on the continent invest in a local startup, then they go in also, or I should say we go in, because I chair that network, and we go in as a supporting act to the guys on ground, giving them leverage. So they've raised 150, we top it up with another 150, and there's your 300 ticket.
Just to take it back a bit, for some people who may not know, what is angel investing or an angel investor?
An angel investor is somebody who invests their personal time, money, and networks to support founders who are building startups. Startups are innovation-led companies that are not using pre-existing formulas like SMEs in their business model. So they're inventing or making it up as they go along. It means they have a significantly high failure rate, anywhere from 50 to 80%. But it also means that when they get it right, the growth rate is astounding. You're talking of seeing anywhere from 10 to 25% month-on-month growth in revenue. And it is that growth that angels mentor, guide, and sort of push the founders to get to. And that's so angel investing is a combination of cash, small tickets, time, advisory, expertise, guidance, and networks. So connecting people to the founder and to the startup. And it's the combination of three that makes for an angel, as opposed to a venture capital, where you actually go out and you aggregate funds from limited partners that you invest like an angel investor into startups. They're two different things. I trust that helps.
A lot. Thank you.
So, Tomi, I'm going to pull you into the future. It's a little bit like we're going to get into our time capsule and take a drive down the road to 2025, 2030, maybe 2040, maybe even 2050. I don't know yet. We'll see where the conversation goes. And if I had to push you to pick one or two sectors, spaces, industries, innovations that stand out for you at the moment, or that get you interested, get your attention, if you start thinking about the future, and specifically within an African context. Of course, global innovation technology is not limited by geography, but which are the aspects that you're looking at and getting excited about for the future, or you think will have a quite a impact down the line?
This is the way I describe this exercise. I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Rip Van Winkle. This is a guy that fell asleep and woke up, at a time in the future. So I've always imagined myself saying, if I woke up, let's just say circa 2030, or let's say 2040, what would be happening? Well, quite a number of things, because a lot of the science fiction books and films have told us what to expect. I mean, I grew up on things like Star Trek and Star Wars. So when I look at what we're doing today, that's what I was watching when I was a kid. So for me, it's not the economists, but the science fiction writers that have the future a bit more accurate than most. So imagine waking up, and the first thing you notice is the fact that what woke me up? It's a human enhancement technology. Currently, we call it iWatch or what have you. There'll be something on you that has been programmed to look at how you slept and wake you up at the optimal time. So we're going to see all kinds of human enhancement technologies from our five senses of taste, sound, smell, etc., and touch, that are going to sort of wrap us, for the want of a better word, in a bubble of our own. And the reason this will be able to happen is because technology will get married to biotechnology, okay? And we're going to increasingly see a blurring of the line between information technology and biotechnology. It's already happening. If you consider the fact that your iWatch can take your pulse, it can take, how many steps you've walked, etc. It can tell you where you are on the planet and how to get to where you need to go. You start to understand what I mean by human enhancement technologies. So I wake up, okay, I'm hungry. It won't be Siri at that time. It'll be more personalized, because it will respond, okay, in voices that you are familiar with or you have chosen. I'm a bit hungry. You know what? Why don't you give me pancakes for breakfast? And the advanced robot will come back and say, I'm sorry, the doctors have said that, your glycemic index will be too high when you take pancakes at this time of the day. If you wait till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when you're going to be doing XYZ, then you can have it. But for now, the best thing for you is this. And goes on and prepares that. How does he prepare it? Well, let's assume it's saying I can't have high sugar. I've got to have a steak. It instructs the 3D printer, okay, that's sitting in my kitchen, to print me a steak and then grill it and get it ready. And the reason it can do that is because, of course, I've got all the ingredients already lined up and delivered. And I can check. How do I check? Well, because again, we've got this, we call it blockchain now, the distributed ledger technology that's going to tell us, what we can and, what we have and what we don't have in terms of assets. That is where that information is going to come from, because I'll have a personalized NFT that tags me, like what we call a digital twin. And that's what's going to be responding to all of those in the digital space while I'm in the physical space. So those are the kind of things that will happen. All right, I've had breakfast and I'm ready to work. Okay, transportation, you're starting to see it now. We're moving into electric, but probably more importantly, we're moving into automation. Okay, so everybody talks about Uber, not realizing where Uber is going is driverless cars. So I jump in and I just say, okay, take me to the office. And of course, again, the AI or quantum computing mechanism kicks in and says, sir, you have a 9 o'clock appointment at the hospital. You can't go to the office yet. So the car's going to take you to the hospital so that you can do your blood test. As an example, as I'm going, you've got satellite enablement that's tracking and letting the doctors in the hospital know, oh, Mr. David is inbound. He's going to be here in 17 minutes. Make sure everything he needs has been prepped. And you start to get a sense of this infusion and integration of technology and humankind that is going to be happening. And that'll be whether it's at work, which is what I've just described, or in entertainment, or even in just casual living with family. That's sort of a thumbnail sketch of a day in the life of. I could go on, but I think you get the picture.
Wow. That sounds incredible. I mean, you just made me see the future, and I could really see it in HD of those days. I don't know what would it be. And you sound very optimistic about it. You don't sound concerned. Or do you have any concerns about it? Because it sounds like a controlled environment where you can decide, but to a certain extent. I mean, do you have any concerns about that kind of future?
There's a balance. We keep thinking, for example, blockchain is unhackable because of the way we see crypto, etc. That's one. Look at the web. The web is one of the most beneficial technologies to have happened to mankind in recent history. But there's a dark web, and look at what it's being used for. So it's the nature of humankind to be a duality. For every head, there's a tail. That's just how we are. So for the optimistic nature I have painted, you can imagine, all right, we're talking of identity theft will not go away, okay? Value theft will not go away. Because why I say value theft is because most people don't realize the nature of our stored value exchanges are changing. So we're moving away from paper into the digital currencies. And that's why everybody's scrambling for crypto, because it's generally recognized that once you move away from paper-based value exchanges into the digital world, then those who control those exchanges, just like the central banks today control the currency exchanges, determining, how much currency can be available in an economy. That's what's going to happen in the digital world. And if you look at the fluctuations, Elon Musk just proved to us, for example, in Bitcoin, what kind of volatility. But look at the recovery. To say, well, yeah, you came in and you went out, but guess what? We're back in town. I think my crypto portfolio, which stood at about 101K at the height, has gone down to 74K today. But that's sort of the nature when you consider we started at 28K just about 3.5, 4 years ago. And that was a multiplier from previous years. You start to get the picture there. So there's a dark side to it, no doubt, including drugs, including just about anything you have in the physical world today. There will be a digital version of it. But again, it's about trusting that humankind is ultimately good, so we will overcome those forces.
Tomi, you touched there on crypto, central banks. It can't help me thinking about the nation state, country boundaries, and changes in power structures in the future. And if I try to think along the role that tech and innovation has in that, at a government level, institution level, I imagine that I assume and I imagine that there'll be certain countries and governments that implement certain technologies and innovations and are thought leaders, whether for good or for bad, and there'll be others who fall behind. And I just wonder, what do you think we 20 years from now, or in our science fiction bubble, I potentially see a African continent that looks very different in terms of boundaries and governments.
Everybody seems to forget that on the 1st of January 2021, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement came into force. And it's been signed up by just about all African countries, bar maybe about 2 or 3. They say the journey of 1,000 years begins with the first step. That was the first step. So you can expect to continue to see integration along those lines. While we will never be a monolithic whole, just be due to the diversity of by then it'll be 2 billion people that live on the planet, speaking over 4,000 languages and coming from well over 2,500 different tribes. You start to get the picture of why that diversity has to be harnessed in a way that it can create value. But having said that, my friend John Perry Barlow said, in cyberspace, okay, national legislation is a local ordinance.
Please say that again.
National legislation is a local ordinance.
What does that mean?
Exactly. It means that, yes, you can legislate for South Africa, but when you consider cyberspace, there are 100 and X other countries that have access to exactly the same thing. And as Nigeria found out just recently when it banned cryptocurrency, all that happens is people just move to the next jurisdiction. You're just a local jurisdiction. You're one of many. Whereas in the physical world, because there are physical boundaries, in the digital world, there aren't any digital boundaries of such. The only thing you as a government could possibly do is turn off the internet, as Ethiopia and Somalia have done recently. But then you discover that there's this thing we call satellite. And so there are certain people that will have access. And because we've got peer-to-peer networking pervasive on mobile phones now, it makes a nonsense of any restrictions you think you can have.
So in many senses, it becomes potentially more and more difficult for a central control of the internet, of access to yeah.
I said this like 20 years ago, distributed is the future. And that's why we're waxing lyrical about things like crypto, blockchain, and other things, simply because it is, the concept of a central command and control is a militaristic viewpoint that does not necessarily lend itself to human community living. It's an artificial construct that we've carried because of the Industrial Revolution, and over the next 50 to 100 years will evaporate as the corporates take over the role of nation states.
Amazing. We had a question that we call, how far do you think we are from living in the Matrix? I'm sure you could already hear where that goes.
Some argue that we're already in the Matrix, we just don't know it. But yeah, that's an interesting one, because that's what I was alluding to earlier. okay, about the integration of biotech, digitech, and human tech.
That is going to mean that entertainment in the future has got all kinds of interesting angles, and I'm sure you've got one or two thoughts about, like, what does it mean? What could entertainment look like in the future?
Well, when you consider that the nature of work is evolving and changing, the nature of entertainment is also doing exactly the same. So entertainment will find itself integrating, just like every other aspect of our lives, with those forces I talked about earlier. So in the physical world, people used to do pot, or well, they probably still do pot, do cocaine, do all of these things. In the digital world, there'll be experimentations with things that codes can do to the human body that we don't even know about now. You may be able to stimulate parts of your cortex that people don't even know how to get to today. So that's one of the things. The other part of it is sort of how the entertainment itself is created. Remember, I talked about distributed. So currently we have this whole concept of centralized entertainment creation. But as Facebook has taught us, and as other platforms like Instagram have taught us, distributed is the way of the future of entertainment. So you see it on YouTube, Instagram, etc. You can sort of start to see where they're going to go, especially as new technologies like holographics kicks in and we can get three-dimensional experiences.
I was about to add on that. There's already a holographic pop star in Japan. It's called Hatsune Miku. And apparently people write songs for it and it sings them and people get paid for that, and it opened for Madonna's concert. So I think the Matrix is here. We just need to embrace it.
Which pill are you taking, Tomi?
Sorry?
Are you taking the blue or the red pill?
I'm going to take the pink pill.
What does that do?
It's called innovation. So I call it the art of the possible. What can your mind conceive that will serve mankind in a way that they've never been served before? That's the big question for me. Because until we realize that we're created for service, I don't think we get far.
That's very deep.
Thank you.
Very deep. Hence I said in the beginning, I'm mostly here to be inspired. I wouldn't have minded just sitting and listening. But this takes me to something I've heard you speak ever so passionately about I think I first heard it 5 years ago in one of your podcasts, and it is the poem framework. I have tried to explain that to people, but what lacks is the passion that you have when you actually break it down. So do you mind going into it for us, please?
And Tomi, I'll add to that, Tomi, is if you can share it for those who haven't heard it before, and whether you think it will be the same in 10 years' time, or will have something changed.
No, because this is something that's taken. Most people don't know. They think poem happened overnight. One of the things I didn't mention, I was a partner at Ernst & Young, and I ran the Ernst & Young incubator in the UK during the .com bubble, which is where our research lent itself and helped to create the original thesis of poem. At that time, it was called Poet, because what we had was what we call the clicks and mortar strategy, where we brought the old guard, like my old employers, Marks and Spencer, and we married them with the new e-commerce players. At that time, M&S wasn't buying into it. Today, it represents a significant proportion of their revenue. And that's where Poem came from. But over the last 10 years, I've been working with it and with startups. And in its current version, let me just share very, very simply what it is. Poem says that for any startup that exists, and I'm being told now that Mr. Davis, this actually applies to all companies. I created it for startups that are technology enabled, but it says for any of those, first thing you want to start with is the founder. You need to understand the founder's vision, which is typically driven by their life experience and context. You can't build a company that's bigger than the mind of the founder. So that's why you start with the founder. Now, understanding the founder has to be done through the lens of their problem vision. So what they see as the problem. Why? Because it's the problem that shapes the solution they prefer. So you start with the founder, the problem, and the solution. That's sort of the genesis of any startup. Once you understand that, the question then becomes, how does that solution manifest itself as a commercial entity? And that's where Poem comes in. Because Poem says very, very simply, now your solution must provide a proposition that is delivered by an organization economically over time in milestones. So proposition, organization, economics, and milestones. But let me break it down because that's what you asked for. What do I mean by proposition? Well, the proposition starts with the market. What market are you playing in? Because if you're playing in South Africa, it's different to if you're playing in East Africa, it's different to if you're playing West Africa, North Africa, or even if you're playing in Sub-Saharan Africa. So the market sets the context, okay, for your offering. What is that market you're playing in? What are the dynamics? What's the regulatory climate? What are the competitors? We could go on. You understand what I mean by market analysis. So that's the first thing you look at. Once you understand that, the question becomes, who are the customers within that market that you're targeting for this particular product or are buying your product? And you understand their segmentation, their demographics, their psychographics, etc. Once you understand the customer and their motivations and their raison d'etre, next question becomes, what are they buying? What's your product service offering? What are the functions? What are the features? How does it work? Okay, what's the business model that makes it profitable? And therein is your proposition, end of. Those are the three components of your proposition. Now we understand your proposition. The question becomes, who's going to deliver that proposition? And that's where the organization comes in. And we talk about the people, okay, from the board of directors or board of advisors through to the executive team that is running the employees and even the partners. So any human being that is involved in the delivery of the product comes under the people construct. Once we understand who these people are, the next question we ask ourselves is, all right, that's fine. How are they going to do this? This is where the processes come in, whether it's the front-end processes that are facing the customer, the internal processes that are managing talent and the employees, or the back-end processes that are managing partners. Whatever those processes are is what makes that company unique, because the way they do things is what's different. Once we understand the processes, well, what binds everybody together today? It's technology. So let's understand the technology. Let's understand the infrastructure, the architecture. Let's understand the systems and all the way through to the user experience. And of course, the security that binds it. That's the technology space. So once you understand the people, the process, and the technology, you've got a firm grip on the organization that's going to deliver the proposition. But that's all nice. Didn't we say commercial? Well, that means economics. Show me the money, as I call it. Well, the first thing is the journey starts with capital, because if you don't have any human or financial capital, you can't start on a commercial journey. So typically it's friends, family, fans, and fools, including founders, that start. Okay, that's the nature of capital. Then you get angel, people like idiots like us. Then you get VCs, and the story goes on. But the question is, what's your capital base? Why? Because it determines the next thing, how much you can burn in expenses. And it's the fact that you're burning capital. That's why we talk about burn rate. Why? because you don't have the third element yet. And I'll come back to the third element, but we need to critically understand your expenses. However, fortunately for us, IFRC, the International Financial Reporting Council, have done an excellent job in helping people, sort of report expenses in structured ways and everything. We don't have to worry about that. Where everybody tends to focus on is the last part of the economics, which is the revenue, the money coming in. What are the sources of those revenues? Are there different channels? Are there different customer segments? How does that break down? What is that revenue rate? Why? Because remember earlier I was talking about if you've got 10 to 20% month-on-month growth in revenue, you're probably a startup that's scaling. So that's why we focus on revenue, because revenue is expected to consume all your expenses. That's when we talk about break even. Once you pass that point, we're talking about profitability, and profitability is not the end, because we expect that, remember we started with capital, you're going to return the capital in multiples, and that's what people like us wait for when we talk about 2x, 3x, 5x, or as I said earlier, 50x, is the fact that that revenue is generating that to the point where either it gives it back or somebody comes and says, you know what, I'll take the future revenue, I'll buy you out, which is what happened in the case of Media 24. So that's sort of the economics of it all. And then what I look for in terms of milestones is understanding from the founders and the executive team in terms of your proposition, your organization, and economics. First thing is, what are the achievements today? What have you done? We call them the acts, by the way. I'll come back to it. Okay, what are your achievements today in your proposition, in your organization, and economics? Given those achievements, what are your challenges today? What's keeping you up nights? What's really bothering you? Okay. Oh, we need to raise. Oh, we've got this. It's typically cash, talent, or customers. And knowing those challenges, what are your targets? I now ask for 24 months. I used to do 36. I found it was unrealistic because of the base assumptions. Remembering we're dealing with startups, we're not dealing with mature companies. So what are your targets over the next 24 months? Let's take a look at them. Ideally, monthly for this year and quarterly for the following year. So what are those targets? Based on your proposition, your organization, and your economics. So those are the milestones that we tend to look at. So that is it in a nutshell. Okay. It is the vision that creates the proposition, which is delivered by the organization economically over milestones. I trust that helps.
Sure. Are you not inspired? Chris is crying here.
You're breaking my brain, Tomi. I'm also wondering what I've been doing the last 10 years. At all. Yeah. I think, Tomi, we're almost out of time here.
Okay.
And perhaps David's got one or two more questions, but like the short variety, I've got one for you, and then a wrap up one. You mentioned science fiction. I love that thought. I think there's so much in the creative space there, and when you also said the art of the possible. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it takes somebody who's operating outside the box in a science fiction they're not inhibited at the moment by what's possible or not possible, because that's not the framework that they're thinking about. Any specific movies recently, or authors, or books, or blog posts, or Twitter feeds, or anything that is that you've thought, I like that, or I'm gonna see what they produce, and I'm gonna watch their next film, because that's pushing the boundaries, just like Star Trek did a few decades ago.
That's a laundry list. My challenge is, on average, at any given time, I'm reading anything from 3 to 5 books at a time, because it depends on context. Don't laugh, but I've got a book in the toilet, which is different to the book on my bedside. And that's different yet again to the book that's on my desk here. Okay. And there's a totally different book in the sitting room, in the living room, when I'm taking a chill pill, because, I like mystery. Okay. So I like biographies. And yeah, funnily enough, I'm wading through Tony Blair's now, only because he did something recently, and I thought, okay, he's written one, might as well wade through that. But my passion and love has always been for science fiction. And I read the old. I'm talking of Journey to the End of the World. I'm talking of The Hobbits. I'm talking of L. Ron Hubbard. I'm talking of proper science fiction, not some of the geeky stuff that's of rate. Then I'm reading things like The Platform Revolution. I'm reading Chaos. What else am I reading currently? Oh yeah, Paradoxical Thinking. That's the last. Yeah.
I like it.
In terms of Twitter, yeah, I follow a few people, but Twitter, I don't put much to Twitter now, other than sort of keeping my pulse on what's happening in my ecosystem. And that's how I tend to treat social media. Yes, I've got maybe a few thousand followers here and there or what have you, but I prefer it as a conversation. So that's how I take it.
And it's Tomi D on all platforms. Am I right?
Correct. TOMIDEE at Tomi D on Twitter, anywhere you want. Yeah, that's me.
We'll put all of this in the show notes that you've mentioned.
Cool.
In closing, I see time is against us. I would have loved to go through the desiderata, but
people can look it up.
Yeah, but there's something about how you say it, but it's because you also you recite it and explain it. That's so marvelous, So I wanted to ask you, if not the desiderata, is there anything you would like to say, to cover that we haven't covered?
Ooh, that we haven't covered. I think, you guys have done a great job. What I would want to share with others is another of my favorite poems. Desiderata is a maxim, okay? But there's a poem by Rudyard Kipling called If that I would commend to others. And I won't recite it to you, but I would ask, people to look it up. I've been accused of it being sexist sometime, because it ends by saying, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. The reason I share it is my dad gave it to me, and so it made sense within that context. But if you take out the gender sensitivity, there are some truisms in there that are true to human life that I commend to people.
Tomi Davies, thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to my grandchildren watching your hologram one day, telling us what the world will be like in 2080.
Fantastic. So do I. I'll be speaking from the hereafter.
Indeed.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
your time.
Tomi.
Take care, guys.